Hi, I'm Craig and welcome to the third video in this series on evolution. Last time we spoke about DNA and I briefly explained what it was and how it works, but we didn't talk about how it is passed down to offspring. Between 1856 and 1863, an Austrian monk and botanist, Gregor Mendel, Gregor Mendel, he performed an experiment on pea plants to understand the principles of heredity because he was curious about how different traits were transferred from one generation to the next. He chose pea plants because they were easy to grow in the monastery and he could easily control their environment and fertilization by using a paintbrush to transfer pollen between plants. So what was Mendel's process for his experiments? He would take two plants of the same height, colour or amount of seeds that the plants produced. He would then check the offspring and see if they were the same or different. So for example, he took two plants, male and female, of the same height. So let's say tall plants, and he fertilized them. He found that the offspring were also tall. He would do the same with short plants and found that the offspring were short. He then crossed a tall male plant and a short female plant, and then a tall female plant and a short male plant, and every time they produced a tall plant. But he had an idea that the tall plant offspring had also acquired the small trait, but it didn't physically show. So he called the tall trait dominant and the small trait recessive. So he then took the next generation, which were all tall, and when they produced the third generation, about 3/4 were tall and 1/4 were small. So what actually happened here? Well, first you need to understand what a gene and an allele are. So a gene is a unit of hereditary information. Okay, hereditary information, which is information that's passed down to offspring. With the exception of some viruses, genes are made up of DNA, which is a molecule that codes genetic information in order to transmit inherited traits. Alleles are also genetic sequences that code for the transmission of traits. So are they the same thing? In simple terms, an allele is a variant form of a gene. So each gene is found at a specific location on a chromosome called a locus. And loci is the plural form of the word. There are two copies of the allele, one inherited from mum and one inherited from dad. The copies are not necessarily the exact same, so when the copies of a gene differ from each other, they are known as alleles. Some genes have multiple alleles, but only two are within the locus. When individuals have different alleles, they can create different phenotypes. Okay? And a phenotype is an outward expression of a gene or an observable trait, just like hair colour or eye colour. Some of these alleles are dominant and some are recessive. The dominant alleles override the recessive alleles and result in the dominant alleles being expressed. In order for the recessive gene to be expressed, the individual requires two of the same allele. So the first generation plants were homozygous. First were homozygous, meaning that both alleles on the height gene were the same, and the second generation had different alleles on the height gene, so they were heterozygous. Okay, so homozygous means that they have the same alleles on a specific gene, and heterozygous means that they have different alleles on that specific gene. So during reproduction, one parent gave the tall allele, let's call it big A, and the other gave the small allele, let's call that little a. Okay. So looking at this chart, the probability is 1 out of 4 offspring will express a small gene because they are homozygous for the small gene. The rest are either homozygous for the big gene or heterozygous. So that's 3/4 will be tall, 1/4 will be small. So let's look at another example, like blood type. So the most common blood type system is the A, B, O, R, H system. There are other blood types, but this is the most common system and the one that most people are aware of. So A and B, okay, they are both dominant over O. Okay, so O is recessive, but A and B are not dominant over each other. They are known as co-dominant. So if one parent gives you an A allele, okay, and the other parent gives you an A allele, yeah, then your genotype is A, okay, and therefore your phenotype or your outward expression of that gene is A. So your blood type is A. If one parent gives you A and the other parent gives you B, okay, then your genotype is AB, and because A and B are co-dominant, your phenotype is AB, or your blood type is AB. If one parent gives you A and the other gives you O, okay, then your genotype is AO, and A is dominant over O, so your phenotype or your blood type is A. If your genotype is BB, then your phenotype is B. Yeah, then your phenotype is B. And if both parents are and if both parents give you the O allele, then that is the only time that your phenotype is O. Yeah? Because O is recessive, you need both alleles to be O in order to be blood type O. If an organism has 2 different alleles on a specific gene, then they're known as heterozygous, like I mentioned earlier, for that gene, such as AB, AO, BO. And if they have the same alleles, they're known as homozygous for that gene, such as AA, BB, and OO. So all of these can be RH positive or RH negative. Okay, and the RH stands for rhesus, and this is a protein that you either have positive or you don't have negative. So A and B blood contain antigens, whereas O blood does not. If someone requires a blood transfusion, for example, then those with A blood cannot be given B blood because the antigens are different and your A blood will fight off the B antigens and your body will reject the blood, and the same is true the other way around. But because O doesn't contain antigens, then if that blood is given to someone who is A type, then there is nothing to fight. So the blood is accepted by your body. So the same goes for the rhesus protein. If you have the rhesus protein, then you can accept blood without it. But if you do not have it, then you cannot accept blood with it. So the O negative is known as a universal donor because it will be accepted by anyone. There are no antigens to fight and no rhesus protein to worry about, and this blood is used in a medical emergency. AB positive blood is known as a universal receiver because people with this blood type have the A antigens, the B antigens and the rhesus protein, so they can accept all blood types. So as you can see from this chart, A type and B type should appear 3 times out of 9. A, 1, 2, 3 times, and B, 1, 2, and 3 times. Okay, out of the 9 that are here. AB should appear 2 times out of 9. Yeah, AB 1 and AB 2. And O should appear once out of 9, just there. So if I asked you which blood type is the most common, the obvious answer would be A and B are equally the most common, and O is the least common. However, this isn't the case. O negative blood is the most common blood type, and AB positive is the least common. I'm not going to go into depth about it in this video, but remember to like and subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified when I upload a video on natural selection. And I will explain how even recessive genes can become the majority within a population. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.